We're standing in this place again. There are 8 children that are deceased. I can't be strong for you. I think about the mother and what this family has lost. I think about this community and what this community has lost. And I don't have the words to give you, and I'm sorry.
A 911 call comes in just before 6 a.m., but it doesn't sound like a normal emergency. The caller isn't inside the house. She's on the roof. Her voice is shaking, barely holding together, as she tells dispatch that a man inside has already shot someone and that there are children still in the house. Then she says something that changes everything. He shot everyone. Within minutes, another call follows. Then another. Different homes. Same suspect. Same name. By the time officers arrive, what they walk into isn't just a crime scene. It's multiple scenes, spread across a quiet neighborhood in Shreveport, each one telling part of a story that would leave an entire city trying to understand how a father could turn on his own family. Because the man they're now searching for is not a stranger. He's not unknown to the victims. And he is their father, Shamar Elkins. In less than an hour, 8 children will be dead, 7 of them his own. And even as police begin to piece together what happened, the timeline becomes harder to process. Not because it's unclear, but because it unfolds with terrifying speed. The first shots are reported at one home. Then, just minutes later, another shooting is reported a block away. A woman, identified by family members as Christina Snow, is found critically injured after being shot. According to relatives, she managed to trigger a 911 call using her phone, an act that may have saved her life. At the same time, chaos is unfolding at a second location. Inside another house, where multiple children are believed to be, someone escapes by climbing onto the roof. Others try to run out the back door. Later, investigators will see the bullet damage near that exit, silent evidence that some of the children were trying to get away. But they didn't make it. By 6:01 a.m., police are on scene. By 6:15, the suspect is already fleeing, armed, dangerous, and now moving beyond the neighborhood. He carjacks a vehicle and leads officers into a chase that spills into a neighboring parish. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it ends. At 6:29 a.m., officers open fire. By shortly after 7 a.m., Shamar Elkins is pronounced dead. But the story doesn't end there. Because while investigators secure the scenes, something far heavier begins to settle in. The number? 8 children, ages 3 to 11. And as names begin to be released, the reality becomes impossible to ignore. This wasn't random, and it wasn't distant. This was a family. By midday, the neighborhood is no longer filled with sirens, but with silence, broken only by crying and the slow gathering of people who are trying to understand what they've just lost. Flowers begin to appear, balloons, stuffed animals. A memorial forms where children were playing just hours earlier, and questions start to rise just as quickly as the shock. What happened inside those homes? Why did it unfold across multiple locations? And more importantly, were there warning signs before this morning that anyone could have seen? Because the deeper investigators look, the more they begin to uncover a timeline that didn't start that morning. It started days earlier, maybe weeks, possibly even longer. And what they find may explain not just how this happened, but why. If you're watching this and you want the full breakdown of what led to that morning, the warning signs, the timeline, and the details that didn't make headlines, stay with this story, because what comes next is not just about what happened. It's about everything that led up to it. The last time anyone saw him before it all happened, nothing seemed out of place. A neighbor would later say he passed by the house the evening before, saw Shamar Elkins sitting outside while children played nearby. It looked ordinary, quiet, routine, the kind of moment no one remembers, until something goes wrong. But just hours later, everything inside that same neighborhood would change. Investigators now begin working backward, trying to understand how the morning unfolded so quickly. The first confirmed location is near Harrison Street, where Christina Snow lived. According to family accounts, Elkins went to her door early that morning. He knocked. When she answered, he shot her. Despite severe injuries, she managed to trigger an emergency call, reportedly using her phone's voice assistant, alerting authorities that something was wrong before anyone even knew how serious it was. But this was only the beginning. Within minutes, the violence moved to a second location, West 79th Street, where Elkins lived with his wife, Shaniqua Pugh, and several of the children. This is where the situation escalated into something far more devastating. Inside that home, multiple children were present. At least 9 people were believed to be inside when the attack began. According to police, the caller who escaped onto the roof told dispatch that the suspect had already shot everyone inside. Imagine that moment. You're not hiding in a room. You're not behind a locked door. You're on a roof, calling for help, watching what's happening below, knowing the person inside is someone you know. Some of the children tried to run. A state official later confirmed that several attempted to escape through the back of the house. When investigators arrived, they would find bullet damage near that exit, evidence that those attempts were met with gunfire. Others took a different route. A woman identified as Pugh's sister and a 12-year-old girl climbed onto the roof in desperation. With nowhere else to go, they jumped. The fall left them injured, but alive. Inside, 8 children did not survive. 7 were Elkins' own. The 8th, a relative. By the time police arrived at approximately 6:01 a.m., the damage had already been done. And still, it wasn't over. At around 6:15 a.m., Elkins left the scene, armed with a firearm described by police as a rifle-type weapon. He carjacked a vehicle and fled, moving quickly out of the neighborhood and into Bossier Parish. Now, what had started as a domestic incident was turning into an active manhunt. Officers tracked him down within minutes. At approximately 6:29 a.m., law enforcement confronted Elkins. Shots were fired. He was struck and pronounced dead shortly after 7 a.m. A firearm was recovered at the scene. But even as officers secured the suspect, the real weight of the case was still unfolding behind them, back at the homes they had just left. Multiple crime scenes, multiple victims, and a timeline so compressed that everything, from the first shot to the suspect's death, happened in under an hour. As investigators moved between locations, they began confirming the identities of the victims. 8 children, ages 3 to 11. For the community in Shreveport, the numbers alone were overwhelming. Officials would later say the deaths more than doubled the number of homicides in the parish for the year. But numbers don't tell the full story. Names do. And for the families, those names weren't statistics. They were daily routines, school mornings, laughter in the yard just hours before everything changed. Meanwhile, inside the investigation, another question was beginning to take shape. Why? Because the sequence of events suggested something deliberate. Movement from one home to another, to targeting specific individuals, and a level of intent that investigators could not ignore. And as they dug deeper into Elkins' recent life, they began to uncover a pattern, not of a single moment of anger, but of something building over time. A relationship breaking down, a court date approaching, and signs, subtle at first, that something wasn't right. This wasn't a random act. It was personal. And what investigators would uncover next would raise an even more unsettling question. Was this preventable? If you're following this case, this is where everything begins to shift. From what happened to why it happened. And the answers are not simple. Before we go further into what investigators uncovered about the days leading up to the shooting, the warning signs, the reported threats, and the mental health struggles, take a moment to engage with this story. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. Do you think there were clear warning signs here? Or was this something no one could have predicted? Because what comes next will challenge that question completely. In the days after the shooting, investigators weren't just looking at what happened inside those homes. They were looking at everything that led up to it. And what they found wasn't a single moment, it was a pattern. On the surface, Shamar Elkins didn't appear disconnected from his family. Photos posted online showed him smiling with his children. One image from Easter captured all 7 of his kids standing beside him, dressed for church. The caption described it as a blessed day. To anyone scrolling past, it looked normal, stable. But just days later, something shifted. He reposted a prayer, one that specifically asked for help controlling his thoughts, his emotions, asking for strength against depression, anger, anxiety, and panic. It wasn't a confession, but it was a signal. And for investigators, it became one of several indicators that something deeper may have been happening beneath the surface. Family members would later describe a man who had been struggling, not loudly, not in a way that drew public attention, but quietly, internally. According to relatives, he had been dealing with mental health issues and had recently sought treatment at a VA hospital. There were also claims, from family interviews, that he had previously tried to take his own life earlier in the year. And those details are based on family reporting and have not been formally confirmed as part of an official investigative finding, but they add important context to the timeline. At the same time, his personal life was beginning to unravel. His wife, Shaniqua Pugh, had filed for divorce. Family members said the reason was infidelity, and the timing is critical. They were expected in court the very next day to finalize it. That means when the shooting happened early Sunday morning, it came less than 24 hours before the legal end of the marriage. According to reporting cited by relatives, there had also been prior threats, statements allegedly made by Elkins suggesting he would harm his family if she left. Those claims have been reported in interviews and media coverage, but should be understood as allegations, not conclusions from a finalized investigation. Still, when you place those elements side by side, relationship breakdown, emotional distress, reported threats, the picture begins to form. Not as an excuse, but as a trajectory. Family members said they tried to help. One relative described inviting him outside, encouraging him to talk, to play cards, to get out of his head. At one point, they even asked if he needed to return to the hospital. He reportedly said no. "I'm just going to deal with it." And that phrase now sits at the center of everything. Because whatever he was dealing with, he dealt with it alone. And by Sunday morning, it had escalated into something irreversible. As investigators continued piecing together the case, another layer emerged, one that extended beyond Elkins himself: the weapon. Authorities confirmed that a firearm had been recovered after the shooting, but shortly after, federal investigators began looking into how that weapon ended up in his possession. A separate criminal complaint was filed against another individual in Shreveport, accused of making false statements about the firearm. According to federal filings, the man initially denied having the weapon, then later admitted he had stored it in his truck and suspected Elkins may have taken it. That case is ongoing, and the charges are allegations. But it adds another dimension to the investigation: access. Because in cases like this, it's not just about intent, it's about opportunity. And while investigators continue to examine that angle, the impact of what happened has already settled into the community. Across Shreveport, memorials began to grow. Flowers, balloons, stuffed animals. People who didn't know the family still showed up because the scale of the loss made it impossible to stay distant. 8 children, 1 family. Funeral arrangements soon followed, with plans for the children to be buried near each other. Support organizations stepped in to assist the surviving family members, and state officials acknowledged the weight of what had happened, not just as a crime, but as a community tragedy. And yet, even with all of that, one question still remains unanswered in a way that satisfies anyone. Could this have been prevented? Because when investigators look back now, they don't just see the morning of April 19th. They see the days before it, the conversations, the warning signs, some subtle, some not. And the moments where intervention might have changed the outcome, or might not have. That uncertainty is what makes this case so difficult to process, because it forces a confrontation with something uncomfortable. Sometimes the signs are there, sometimes they're missed, and sometimes they're recognized too late. If you've stayed with this story to this point, then you already understand. This isn't just about what happened. It's about what led to it and what can be learned from it. Before we close, take a moment to engage. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share your thoughts below. Do you believe cases like this can be prevented, or are there situations where the outcome becomes unavoidable? Because the conversation around that question is just as important as the story itself. By the time the sun fully rose over Shreveport that Sunday morning, the sirens had faded, but the silence that followed felt heavier. Investigators moved carefully between the homes, Harrison Street, West 79th Street, documenting what had happened, trying to reconstruct a sequence that, on paper, lasted less than an hour, but in reality would leave a permanent mark on the city.
I don't know what people think in the crevices of their mind to want to harm another human being, let alone that of children who have their whole life ahead of them. From what I've learned about this incident is that it's domestic in nature that makes it even more horrific for all the fighting that we do as it relates to this. And maybe you can stand strong with this, but I can't without shedding tears of traumatic pain. I pain and I grieve for this family. I grieve for the lives that are lost, and I'm asking you to please utilize every resource that the sheriff has brought forth now when you know that these situations occur. We cannot be and make this a joke. This is not a freaking joke. This is real, and this is the result when someone snaps. So I'm gonna ask the community, along with prayer, with every mental health consultant, counselor that is out here, this family and this community needs you. I need you. Because how do we get through this? How do we get to the next level? It is real and this is raw. And these are the tragedies when there are domestic violence or domestic disturbances in our community.